This is not just a story about betrayal. It's about a woman who gave everything, and a son who thought he could get away with taking it all. But he was wrong. My name is Margaret Hale, and I am 58 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being a mother meant sacrificing everything for your child. And sacrifice I did. I worked 3 jobs at once just to keep food on the table and pay the bills. I skipped vacations, ignored my own dreams, and poured every ounce of energy into raising my only son, Adrian. When he wanted to attend an expensive university, I made it happen. When he needed money for his first mortgage, I signed the check. When he got married, I paid for the wedding he and his bride dreamed of. Through all of it, I never asked for anything in return. Not respect, not gratitude, only love. But what Adrian said to a nurse on the night I nearly lost my life, it shattered every illusion I ever held about motherhood. And it forced me to see the truth I had been running from for decades. That night, lying in a hospital bed with monitors beeping beside me, I realized my sacrifices hadn't built me a son. They had created a stranger. And from that moment on, I swore I would never let him use me again. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had been keeping a little calendar by the fridge, marking off the days until Adrian's birthday. I was planning to surprise him. With a check, yes, even at 33 years old, I was still giving him money as gifts. I had set aside $5,000 for him. It felt foolish now, but at the time, it was what I thought a mother was supposed to do. That night, I was standing at the stove stirring a pot of stew. The house was quiet, too quiet, the way it always was. My life had shrunk down to lonely dinners and the occasional phone call that usually ended with Adrian asking for money. My chest felt tight, but I ignored it. Years of pushing myself had taught me to silence pain, to keep working no matter how exhausted I was. But this time was different. The tightness grew sharper, like a fist squeezing the air out of me. My vision blurred. The spoon slipped from my hand, clattering against the tiled floor. The next moment, my knees buckled. I remember the pot bubbling, the smell of onions filling the room, and then darkness. When I woke, I was surrounded by the rhythmic beeping of machines. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, sterile and cold. My mouth was dry, my throat raw. A nurse leaned over me, her expression both relieved and concerned. "You're awake," she whispered softly, adjusting the IV line. "You gave us quite a scare." I blinked at her, disoriented. What happened?" "You collapsed in your home. It was a neighbor who heard the crash and called emergency services. You're lucky. It could have been much worse." Turned my head slightly, taking in the monitors, the oxygen tube, the unfamiliar ceiling. My body ached as if I had been trampled. "You had a cardiac episode," the nurse explained gently. "Your heart was under enormous stress. If help hadn't arrived when it did, you might not have survived." Her words sent a chill through me. I had been so close to death, and no one would have even known. No family gathered around me. No one rushing to hold my hand. Just me, alone, or so I thought. Because then the nurse spoke again. "We called your son," she said, a faint smile softening her face. "Adrian, right?" He answered on the second ring. For a moment, relief washed over me. "He cares." He picked up. The nurse hesitated. Her smile faltered, and something unreadable flickered in her eyes. She thought I hadn't noticed, but I did. What did he say?" I asked, my voice weak, raspy. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. "Well, he said he was busy. He was at dinner with his wife. He asked if it was really serious, and when I explained that you'd had a near-fatal collapse, She trailed off, biting her lip. "Please," I whispered. "Tell me." She exhaled slowly, reluctant. He said, and these were his exact words, "She always exaggerates. I don't have time for this tonight. Tell her I'll check in tomorrow." And then he hung up. My body froze. The monitor beside me beeped louder as my heart rate spiked. The nurse hurried to check the machine, placing a calming hand on my arm. "Please, Mrs. Hale, you need to rest. Don't let this upset you too much right now." But how could I not? Those words played on repeat in my head. She always exaggerates. I don't have time for this. I had worked myself to the bone for decades, given him everything, sacrificed until there was nothing left of me but exhaustion. And in the moment my life almost ended, my only child couldn't even be bothered to leave a dinner reservation. The room seemed colder. My chest tightened again, not from illness, but from something deeper, heartbreak. I turned my face away, hot tears sliding silently down my cheeks. The nurse patted my shoulder gently, but I hardly felt it. The weight of Adrian's dismissal was heavier than the heart monitor strapped to my chest. That was the moment. Right there in that sterile hospital bed, I felt something inside me shatter. The following days passed in a blur of tests, IV fluids, and quiet observation. I watched other patients in the ward receive visitors, husbands, wives, children, grandchildren bringing flowers and laughter. But my bed remained empty. Not once did Adrian appear. Not once did he call back. The nurses avoided mentioning it, but I could see the pity in their eyes when they checked on me. It stung worse than any physical pain. I wasn't just sick, I was forgotten. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, I thought back over the years. Every birthday when Adrian wanted the newest toy, I found a way, even if it meant skipping meals myself. Every time he needed new shoes, new clothes, school supplies, I made it happen. College tuition? I worked overtime shifts, nights cleaning offices, weekends managing a bakery counter. When he bought his first house, I handed him a check that drained my savings. When he married Cassandra, I paid for the venue, the dress, the honeymoon. Altogether, I had poured more than $850,000 into ensuring my son lived a good life. But what had he given me in return? A handful of phone calls a year, quick visits where his eyes stayed glued to his phone, requests for more money dressed up as emergencies. Love? No. Gratitude? No. Respect? Not even close. The truth slammed into me like ice water. I hadn't been mothering. I had been enabling. I had mistaken dependency for love. I had believed that sacrificing myself would buy his devotion, his care, his loyalty. But it hadn't. All I had done was teach him that my love was bottomless, my wallet endless, and my life expendable. And now, I was paying the price. One night, unable to sleep, I whispered into the darkness. The woman who lived for her son died that night. Tears burned my eyes, but my voice was steady. A stronger woman was born. I didn't know exactly what that would mean yet, but I felt the stirrings of something inside me I hadn't felt in decades, resolve. I would not be the woman who collapsed at the stove and waited for someone else to save her. No. From now on, I would save myself. That realization was the first crack of light in a life that had been drowning in shadows. And though I didn't know it yet, the choice I made in that hospital bed would set in motion a storm that would strip Adrian and Cassandra of everything they thought they could take from me, because betrayal may break you, but sometimes it also wakes you up. The days in the hospital passed slowly, each one melting into the next. The beeping of machines became a rhythm I both dreaded and depended on. Each morning, I watched sunlight filter through the blinds and listened to the sounds of families bustling in and out of the ward. The woman in the bed beside me had her daughter visit every day, bringing her fresh fruit and flowers. Down the hall, a man recovering from surgery was never without the company of his wife, who read to him in a soft, steady voice. Even the patients, with fewer visitors, had someone stop by, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker. But me? My bed remained empty. Adrian never came. Not once. No flowers, no phone call, No message left at the front desk asking about my condition. The nurses tried to hide their pity, but I could see it when they adjusted my IV or set down a tray of food. To them, I was the woman who had given her life to a son who couldn't even be bothered to show up. And in that silence, I had nothing to keep me company except my memories, and the gnawing truth that those memories painted. I thought back to the decades of sacrifice. The 3 jobs I juggled when Adrian was little just to keep the mortgage paid. The endless overtime shifts to cover his tuition at that prestigious university he insisted on attending. The check I wrote to help him with his down payment. The wedding bills I covered because Adrian claimed, "It would look bad if my wife's parents paid more than you, $850,000. That was the rough total I came to, lying in that bed, staring at the ceiling. 8 chachi. $150,000 that had flowed out of my pocket and into his life. And still, when I was fighting for breath, he couldn't spare an evening. The realization cut through me like glass. But strangely, alongside the pain, I felt something else stirring. Resolve. The day I was discharged, I sat at the edge of the bed in the stiff, standard-issue gown. The nurse handed me my paperwork and wished me well, but her eyes lingered on me in a way that told me she feared I'd be back. But I knew something she didn't. The woman being wheeled out of that hospital was not the same one who had collapsed by her stove a week earlier. When I arrived home, I opened my closet and pulled out a black suit I hadn't worn in years. It was sharp, tailored, elegant. The kind of suit I used to wear in the early years when I had dreams of being more than just a mother defined by her son's needs. As I buttoned the jacket and looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Gone was the tired, hunched figure who lived for scraps of affection. Standing in her place was someone harder, clearer, and ready for battle. It wasn't just fabric. It was armor, and I knew exactly what my first step had to be. The next morning, I walked into the grand lobby of Langley & Associates, the bank where my accounts had been tied to Adrian's for years. The marble floors gleamed. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and money. Behind the desk sat Victor Langley, a man I had known for nearly 2 decades. He had always been polite, professional, the kind of banker who remembered birthdays and asked about family. But as he stood to greet me, I saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Margaret," he said warmly, "it's been a while. How are you feeling?" I shook his hand firmly. "Better than I've felt in years, Victor, but I need your help." We sat across from each other in his office, sunlight spilling across stacks of papers. I looked him in the eye, my voice steady. "I want every account in my name liquidated. All joint accounts with my son closed. Every credit card canceled. Every access point cut off." His eyebrows rose. "That's a significant step. Are you sure? Your son—" "My son," I interrupted, "is a grown man who has drained me long enough. I want control of what's mine, and I want it today." There was steel in my voice, the kind I hadn't used in decades. Victor studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll need your signature on a few documents." An hour later, the paperwork was done. My accounts were secure. Adrian's access was gone. As I walked out of that building, sunlight warming my face, I felt lighter than I had in decades. My phone buzzed with missed calls, Adrian's name flashing over and over again. I let it ring. For the first time in decades, I whispered to myself as I slid into my car. I felt free. It didn't take long. 2 days later, Adrian stormed into my house without knocking. His face was red, his tie askew, anger practically radiating off him. "What the hell did you do?" he barked, slamming the door behind him. I sat calmly in my armchair, a cup of tea in hand. "Good afternoon to you too, Adrian." "Don't play games with me, Mom," he snapped. "The accounts are frozen, the cards are canceled. My mortgage payment bounced. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I sipped my tea slowly, deliberately. "I know exactly what I've done. I've taken back my life." His eyes widened. Your life? This isn't just about you, Cassandra? And we have bills, responsibilities, a certain lifestyle people expect. I set the cup down firmly. Listen to yourself. Not once have you asked if I'm okay. Not once have you acknowledged that I nearly died. All you care about is your lifestyle. That's not fair, he muttered, pacing. I've been busy. You always exaggerate. You make me out to be some kind of villain. I leaned forward, my voice low and cutting. I heard what you told the nurse, Adrian. The night I was lying in that hospital bed, you dismissed me like I was nothing, like my life wasn't worth interrupting your dinner. Do you have any idea what that felt like? For a moment, he faltered. His eyes darted away, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Then he shook his head, trying to recover. I didn't mean it like that. You know how I get when I'm stressed. I was just caught off guard. Excuses, I said sharply. That's all I've ever gotten from you. Excuses, manipulations, guilt trips. And I fell for them, again and again. But not anymore. His tone hardened. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. Everything you have, I'm supposed to inherit. That's how it works. The words hit me like a cold wind. There it was, his truth laid bare. You don't love me, I whispered, more to myself than to him. You love what I can do for you. He scowled. You're being dramatic. Stop trying to punish me. I stood slowly, meeting his eyes, unflinching. No, Adrian, I'm not punishing you. I'm freeing myself. I will not be your safety net anymore. If you fall, you fall. And maybe then you'll learn the value of what I gave you all these years. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he threw up his hands in frustration. You'll regret this. You're cutting off your own family. I shook my head. No, Adrian, you cut me off the moment you chose money and convenience over my life. I'm simply finishing what you started. His face twisted with fury, but he had no words left. With a final glare, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding. But underneath the adrenaline, there was a profound sense of peace. For the first time in 33 years, I had stood my ground against my son. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. The confrontation with Adrian left me shaken, but not defeated. His words echoed in my mind, sharp and cruel. Everything you have, I'm supposed to inherit. It wasn't about me at all. It was about what I could give him. I needed clarity. I needed to know the truth about what my son had been doing behind my back all these years. My instincts told me there was more to the story than careless neglect. His desperation, his anger, the way he panicked when the accounts froze. There was something larger, something he was hiding. That night, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Naomi Fletcher, came the voice on the other end. A wave of memories washed over me. Naomi and I had gone to college together, two young women full of fire and ambition. While I had buried myself in motherhood, she had built a career as a private investigator, earning a reputation for uncovering truths others wanted buried. Naomi, I said softly. It's Margot. Margot Hale. There was a pause, then a surprised laugh. Margot, it's been ages. What's going on? You sound different. I need your help, I whispered, my throat tightening. It's about my son, Adrian. Within days, Naomi was sitting across from me in my living room, a leather-bound notebook in hand. Her sharp eyes scanning my face as I laid everything bare. My collapse, the phone call, the confrontation, the financial betrayal. She listened without judgment, jotting down notes, asking precise questions. Finally, she leaned back. You want me to find out what he's been doing with your money, where it's gone, who he's really become. I nodded. I can't keep living in the dark. If I'm going to cut him off completely, I need to know the full truth. Naomi's smile was thin but determined. Then let me shine the light. Margot's own discoveries. While Naomi began her work, I decided I couldn't just sit idly by. I had been passive for too long, so I opened my laptop and started digging. Adrian's business records were surprisingly easy to find. Public filings, contracts, the kind of paperwork most people never bother to read. To my shock, his consulting firm was thriving, not struggling, not hanging by a thread as he had so often claimed. Thriving. His name appeared on real estate documents, new office leases, even a partnership with a luxury brand. And Cassandra, my daughter-in-law? She had branded herself as a lifestyle influencer. Her social media accounts overflowed with curated images of designer outfits, spa retreats, first-class flights, and dinners at Michelin-star restaurants. Each photo felt like a knife. One image in particular froze me in place. It was taken the same night I had collapsed, lying unconscious in my kitchen. There, on Cassandra's Instagram feed, was a photo of her and Adrian clinking champagne glasses at a restaurant so expensive I had only ever read about it in magazines. The caption read, "Celebrating love and success. Cheers to the good life." My cane. Hands shook as I stared at the screen. They had been celebrating while I was fighting for my life. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It was written in pixels, lit up by the glow of my laptop screen. Investigation results. A week later, Naomi returned with a thick folder. She set it on the coffee table between us, her expression grim. "You were right," she said. "There's more than neglect here. There's fraud, deception, betrayal at a level I didn't expect." My stomach twisted as I opened the folder. Inside were documents, photos, screenshots, evidence carefully compiled and annotated. Naomi pointed to the first section. Adrian's firm has been submitting fake invoices, fabricated projects, ghost employees. It looks like he funneled hundreds of thousands of your money into propping up false expenses, then redirected the funds to personal accounts. I stared at the numbers, the forged signatures, the damning trail of lies. "And those emergencies he always came to you with?" Naomi continued. "They were fabricated, car accidents that never happened, business deals that never existed. He played you, Margot. Every time he said he was drowning, he was lying. He was siphoning your sacrifice into his luxury." I swallowed, hard, the air thick in my throat. "And Cassandra?" Naomi flipped to another section, photos, screenshots, messages. "She knows. In fact, she benefits. Every designer handbag, every trip to Paris, every flashy event, funded with your money. She's not just complicit, she's comfortable." My eyes stung as I stared at the smiling photos of Cassandra draped in gowns, sipping wine on yachts. But Naomi wasn't finished. "There's more," she said quietly. "Adrian is cheating. He's been involved with a woman named Elena Cross for over a year. Dinners, hotel stays, even a weekend trip to the Caribbean. It's all here." The world tilted. My son, the boy I raised, the man I had sacrificed everything for, wasn't just neglectful. He was deceitful, dishonest, and reckless. "And Cassandra?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Naomi's eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "She knows. She tolerates it, because she values the lifestyle more than the marriage. They've struck an unspoken arrangement. He cheats, she spends, and your money makes it possible." The words hit me like thunder. It wasn't a family. It was a business arrangement built on my labor, my sacrifices, my blind devotion. Margot's reaction, I closed the folder slowly, my hands trembling. My heart should have been breaking. My soul should have been crushed under the weight of it. But instead, something else surged inside me. It wasn't despair. It wasn't grief. It was fire. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the garden I had tended for years, the roses blooming despite neglect. My reflection in the glass no longer looked like the weary, broken woman Adrian had dismissed. "They thought I was weak," I whispered. My voice was cold, steady. They thought I'd keep giving until I had nothing left. They thought I'd die before I ever stood up to them. I turned back to Naomi, my eyes hard as steel. They had no idea what they just unleashed. For decades I had lived for my son. But now I would live for myself. And in doing so, I would make sure Adrian and Cassandra felt the full weight of the empire they had built on my back crumbling beneath them. This wasn't just about reclaiming my money. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, my life. The reckoning had only just begun. The folder Naomi left me with became my weapon. Page after page of lies, deception, and manipulation stared back at me, each one a reminder of how far Adrian had fallen and how blind I had been. But grief had burned away into something sharper, colder, strategy. I knew Adrian better than anyone. I knew his weaknesses, his vanity, his obsession with appearances, his hunger for wealth without the patience to earn it. And more importantly, I knew how deeply his so-called empire depended on me. One late evening, sitting at my dining room table with a glass of red wine, I began combing through every financial document Victor, the banker, had provided. The picture came into sharp focus. Adrian's business wasn't as stable as it looked on the surface. It was propped up by personal loans, flashy lines of credit, and risky investments he never could have qualified for without my name attached. And now that my name was gone, those dominoes were beginning to wobble. Victor had explained it simply. Without your financial backing, the banks will start recalling loans. Creditors will panic. It won't happen overnight. But Adrian's overextended position will collapse under its own weight. That was all I needed to hear. For years, I had handed him safety nets. Now, I was pulling every single one away. If Adrian wanted to gamble with his life, then he would learn what it meant to lose. Legal protections. The next step was legal. I scheduled an appointment with Eleanor Briggs, a sharp, silver-haired attorney known in town for her no-nonsense approach to family disputes. I walked into her office with my suit pressed, my head high, and Naomi's folder tucked neatly in my bag. Eleanor listened quietly as I explained everything. Adrian's neglect, the fraud, the mistress, the exploitation. Her eyes, cool and piercing, never left mine. When I finished, she tapped her pen against her notepad. You've been more generous than most courts would expect. Frankly, you've enabled him, but it's not too late to protect yourself. If you're ready to cut him off, we'll make it airtight. She drafted a new will that very day. Adrian was written out completely. Every dollar, every asset, every heirloom redirected to charities, scholarships, and the few friends who had truly stood by me. Eleanor looked at me across the desk as she slid the document over for my signature. Once you sign this, Margaret, there's no going back. He will be furious when he finds out. I took the pen without hesitation. Good. Let him be furious. He's lived too long thinking I'll always clean up his messes. The ink dried, and with it, decades of guilt slipped from my shoulders. But I wasn't done yet. I asked Eleanor to help me draft one more document, a letter of disinheritance, sealed in an envelope. Not for the courts, not for legality, for Adrian. A final message in my own words, explaining exactly why he was being cut off. It was not a plea, not a lecture, just the cold truth. When the day came, he would open that letter and see, in black and white, the reality of what he had lost. Evidence collection. With legal protections secured, I turned to evidence. For years, I had kept old phones, emails, and voicemails tucked away in drawers, never quite knowing why I couldn't let go. Now, I understood. They weren't just memories. They were proof. Nights stretched into early mornings as I sat at my desk, headphones on, listening to Adrian's voice echo through time. Messages of desperation, of begging, of fake emergencies. Mom, I just need $5,000 to cover a sudden expense. The deal fell through, but if I get 10 grand now, I can salvage it. Each one had felt urgent, life or death. Now, paired with Naomi's investigation, I could see them for what they were. Lies, crafted with precision, each designed to open my wallet. I hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, meticulous man named Paul. Over the course of several weeks, he pieced together the paper trail. The result was staggering. $800,000, Paul said, adjusting his glasses as he slid a report across my table. That's the amount directly traceable to personal luxury, cars, jewelry, vacations, entertainment. None of it business, none of it survival, pure indulgence. I skimmed the report, my stomach tightening. And the taxes? Paul's expression turned grim. That's where it gets ugly. Adrian has been hiding income, misreporting expenses. If the IRS looks too closely, he could be facing serious charges. For a long moment, I just sat there, the weight of it pressing down on me. Then slowly, I nodded. Good. Let him face the consequences of his own making. Manipulation attempts. It didn't take long for Adrian to sense the ground crumbling beneath him. First came the phone calls, soft, rehearsed apologies that rang hollow. Mom, I made mistakes. I shouldn't have said those things. But you know I love you, right? We're family. Families forgive. When those went unanswered, the gifts arrived. Bouquets of flowers delivered to my doorstep. Jewelry boxes left in my mailbox. Even an expensive silk scarf I knew he couldn't afford. I sent every package back unopened. Next came the desperation. Cassandra herself showed up one evening, tears streaking her carefully made-up face. Margaret, please. We're going through a rough patch. I know Adrian's made mistakes, but we're trying for a baby. Don't you want to be a grandmother? Don't you want to help us build a family? The lie was almost laughable. I had Naomi's evidence tucked neatly away. Cassandra knew about Elena, had tolerated her for months. Her crocodile tears did nothing but solidify my resolve. I looked her straight in the eye. If you ever do have a child, it will not be my responsibility to raise him. Leave my property, Cassandra, and don't come back. Her face twisted with frustration before she stormed away, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Financial earthquake. Then the collapse began. Victor called me one afternoon with a tone of quiet gravity. Margaret, the banks have started recalling Adrian's loans. His credit cards are maxed, and with your accounts closed, there's no backup. The lenders are circling. I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly. Let them circle. Within weeks, the effects were visible. Adrian's luxury car was repossessed, hauled away from his driveway under the curious stares of his neighbors. Cassandra's designer shopping sprees dwindled to nothing. Social media, once a parade of extravagance, grew suspiciously quiet. The whispers began in their social circle. Invitations slowed. Friends distanced themselves. The perfect facade was cracking, and people could smell the rot beneath. Adrian called again, his voice raw with panic this time. Mom, you don't understand. This isn't just about me. It's about our family name, our reputation. People are watching. Please, just cover one loan, just this once, and I'll make it right. I let the silence stretch before I answered. I covered more than 30 years' worth of just this once, Adrian. You've run out of chances. His sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected that. And then, for the first time in my life, I hung up on my son. As I sat back in my chair, the weight of decades lifted from my chest. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't a victim. I was a woman who had finally stopped bleeding for someone who never cared if I lived or died. And watching his empire crumble, piece by piece, brick by brick, wasn't just justice, it was liberation. The timing had to be perfect. I wasn't just cutting Adrian off anymore. I was dismantling the illusion he'd built. Naomi had given me photos of him with Elena Cross. laughing together over wine, entering hotels at midnight, walking hand in hand through the city streets. I chose one photo carefully. It wasn't scandalous, but it was damning. Adrian leaning across a restaurant table, his hand covering Elena's, their faces close, intimate. A picture that told the truth in silence. I slipped it into an envelope along with a single handwritten note. Your mother isn't blind. 2 days later, I heard the roar of his car tires as he pulled into my driveway. He didn't knock. He stormed in, red-faced, holding the photo in his fist. What the hell is this, Mom? He spat, slamming the picture on the table. I looked, at it calmly, then back at him. It's exactly what it looks like. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. You've been spying on me? Hiring people to follow me around? I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. Don't flatter yourself, Adrian. You're not that hard to find. The world you built is shallow, flashy, public. You wanted people to see you, to envy you. I just made sure I was watching too. His face twisted. You think this proves anything? Cassandra knows about Elena. We have an understanding. The admission didn't surprise me. It only confirmed what Naomi had told me. Yes, I said, letting each word cut like glass. She knows. She tolerates it because she loves the lifestyle. And do you know who paid for that lifestyle, Adrian? He froze. I didn't wait for him to answer. I know about the fake invoices, the false emergencies, the $800,000 you drained from me for your so-called business. I know about the tax fraud. I know about Cassandra's shopping sprees, her designer clothes, her first-class trips, funded with my exhaustion, my sacrifices, and I know that without my money, you're not a successful man. You're a fraud, Adrian, a coward hiding behind luxury. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. His mouth opened, then closed, his eyes wide with shock. Mom? He finally whispered, but I raised a hand to silence him. No, you don't get to call me that anymore. Mothers nurture, mothers protect. You've treated me like an ATM with a heartbeat. You don't love me. You love what I could do for you. And now that it's gone, so is your empire. His hands trembled as he shoved the photo back into his pocket. Without another word, he stormed out. But I saw it in his eyes before he left, the first flicker of fear. The collapse had begun. It started small. Cassandra's car was the first to go, a gleaming white Mercedes that she flaunted in every social. Media Post was hauled away by a tow truck in broad daylight. A neighbor filmed it, and within hours, the video was circulating online. Cassandra posted a story later, pretending she had upgraded to something sleeker. But no new car ever appeared. Next, the mortgage. Without my financial backing, Adrian's house of cards was collapsing. The bank filed a notice of default. I knew because I had quietly asked Victor to keep me informed. Then the loans. Business. Partners grew restless. Lenders refused to extend credit. One by one, contracts were canceled. Adrian's booming empire shrank to whispers of unpaid bills and unanswered calls. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't have to. I had simply stepped back, and gravity was doing the rest. The gossip spread quickly in their social circle. People who had once envied Cassandra's lifestyle now smirked behind her back. Invitations slowed, sponsorship deals dried up. Her carefully curated influencer career, built on illusions of wealth and glamour, began to wither. I watched it unfold with a quiet satisfaction. Not out of cruelty, but out of justice. They had built their thrones from my bones. Now the thrones were crumbling, but fate, it seemed, had one more twist in store. Naomi called one afternoon, her voice carrying a hint of grim amusement. Margot, you're not going to believe this. Cassandra has been playing her own game. What? Do you mean? She's been having an affair with one of Adrian's closest friends, Daniel Hart. The name made my breath catch. Daniel wasn't just a friend. He was Adrian's biggest client, the man whose contracts kept Adrian's business alive. Naomi continued, Daniel's wife found out, filed for divorce, and she has receipts, photos, messages, hotel bills. It's about to get messy. The news spread like wildfire. Within weeks, Daniel fired Adrian publicly, severing their partnership in a humiliating press release that made its way into local business journals. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adrian had cheated, Cassandra had tolerated it, and now Cassandra's own betrayal had detonated the last pillar holding up Adrian's world. Their empire wasn't just financially ruined, it was socially annihilated. At dinner parties, their names were whispered as cautionary tales. On social media, Cassandra's once flawless image was mocked, her posts flooded with comments calling her a fraud, a gold digger, a hypocrite. And Adrian? He became a ghost. The man who once boasted about being untouchable now avoided the public eye, skulking in shadows, unable to face the wreckage he had created. I sat on my porch one evening, a cup of tea warming my hands, watching the sun sink behind the trees. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not joy, not yet, but peace. They had taken so much from me, my money, my time, my health, my faith in family. But they had underestimated me. They thought I would die quietly, still bleeding for their ambitions. Instead, I had lived. And I had turned their greed into their undoing. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to fight. I simply stepped back, let the truth surface, and watched as the lies consumed them. Justice had a way of righting itself, and I knew this was only the beginning. It was late on a Sunday evening when I heard the knock. Not the arrogant pounding of before, but something softer, hesitant. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something inside told me to answer. When I opened the door, Adrian stood there. He looked nothing like the man who used to strut in designer suits and polished shoes. His jacket was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and for the first time in decades I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, I need to talk to you." I didn't step aside. "Then, talk." He swallowed hard, shifting on his feet like a child. "Everything's falling apart. The banks, the contracts. Cassandra's threatening to leave me. I don't know what to do." His voice trembled, his bravado gone. "I need your help." For a long moment I studied him. This was the boy I had raised, the man I had funded, the stranger who had turned his back on me in a hospital bed. I crossed my arms. "Help? You mean money?" He shook his head quickly. No, not just money. Guidance, support. You've always been the one to keep me steady. I know I've made mistakes, but you're my mother." I let silence hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Then quietly, I asked, "Do you even hear yourself, Adrian? After everything I gave, the only time you come back is when you're desperate. You don't want me. You want what I can provide." He flinched, as though I had struck him. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I pressed, my voice sharper now. "Where were you when I lay in the hospital, alone, fighting for my life? Where were you when I needed comfort, even just a hand to hold? You were at dinner with Cassandra, celebrating while I was fighting to breathe. Tell me, Adrian, what did you value more, my life or your lifestyle?" Tears welled in his eyes. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. "Say it, admit it. You valued money, not me." His shoulders slumped, his lips trembled, and finally, in a broken whisper, he said it. I valued money." The truth, spoken at last. I nodded slowly. "And that is why you lost me. Forgiveness isn't free, Adrian. And love, real love, cannot be bought." For the first time, he broke. His sobs filled the quiet night, his hands covering his face. But I didn't comfort him. I had spent a lifetime doing that. This time, I turned away, but I wasn't done. The confrontation had cracked him, but cracks weren't enough. I needed to make sure the truth was undeniable, etched into memory so he could never twist it, never rewrite history, to suit himself. So I summoned him, and Cassandra. I invited them both to my home under the pretense of talking things through. They came, tense and wary, Cassandra dressed in muted colors rather than her usual glamour, Adrian silent and hollow-eyed. When they entered the living room, they froze. Spread across my dining table were folders, printouts, and photographs, years of evidence meticulously organized. Naomi's reports, Paul's financial analysis, screenshots of Cassandra's social media, pictures of Adrian with Elena, documents showing tax fraud and unpaid loans. The table looked less like a family gathering and more like a courtroom. I gestured to the chairs. Sit. They obeyed. I began slowly, methodically. This is what you took from me. I slid the first folder forward. Bank statements showing transfers, checks, deposits. $850,000 over 30 years. Money I worked for, money I bled for, gone. Cassandra shifted uncomfortably. Adrian stared at his hands. This, I continued, laying down photographs of Adrian and Elena, is how you repaid me. Betrayal, lies, affairs conducted while your wife paraded herself on social media, pretending to live a fairy tale. Cassandra's face paled. You had no right, I cut her off sharply. No right? I had every right. You lived on my back, Cassandra. Every handbag, every vacation, every photo op, you owed to me. You knew about the affairs. You allowed them because my money bought your silence. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Next came the final blow. I slid forward the tax documents Paul had uncovered. And this is the legacy you tried to build, Adrian. Fraud, lies, crimes that could put you behind bars. His head snapped up, eyes wide with terror. Mom, please, don't. I leaned forward, my voice cold as steel. Don't what? Don't expose. The truth? Don't hold you accountable? For decades I let you manipulate me, guilt me, break me, no more. The room was silent, except for the sound of their shallow breathing. Finally, I straightened, gathering the papers into neat stacks. My voice dropped to a quiet, chilling calm. This isn't over, I said. It's just beginning. Adrian's face crumpled. Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. But I felt no pity. This was not cruelty. This was justice. And justice, I had learned, is not about revenge. It is about truth. And the truth was, finally, irrevocably laid bare. As I watched them sit in silence, stripped of their illusions, I realized something profound. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their love. I had finally found my strength, and it was mine alone. They could rage, they could weep, they could beg, but the days of me carrying them were over. The reckoning had come, and for the first time in decades, I was free. Chatuti. Silence in my house felt different now. It wasn't the suffocating silence of loneliness. It was the calm silence of peace. The day after Adrian and Cassandra left my home in disgrace, I walked through every room with a quiet determination. For years, my house had been decorated to please others. Neutral walls, safe furniture, things Adrian always said would hold value. It wasn't my taste. It wasn't my heart. So I changed it. I repainted the living room a warm sage green, a color that made me feel like I was sitting in a forest. I filled the kitchen with copper pots and bright curtains. I bought a piano, even though I hadn't touched one since I was a girl, and I promised myself I would learn again. Then, for the first time in my life, I bought a car that I wanted. Not Something practical, not something that would last for Adrian someday. A sleek, deep blue sedan with leather seats and a sunroof. I sat in it for hours after driving it home, just breathing in the smell of newness, the smell of freedom. And I booked a trip, a 2-week cruise to Alaska. I had always dreamed of seeing glaciers, of feeling the cold wind whip against my face as mountains rose from the sea like ancient guardians. Adrian had always laughed when I mentioned it. "Why go somewhere cold when you could be in the Caribbean?" he used to say. But this trip wasn't for him. It was for me. On that cruise, I stood on the deck wrapped in a wool coat, watching orcas slice through the water. I drank hot chocolate by the fire, spoke to strangers who became friends, and for the first time in decades, I felt the world open up again. When I returned, I began writing. Not just diary entries or scattered thoughts, an actual memoir. I poured every memory onto the page. The exhaustion of working 3 jobs, the pride of sending Adrian to college, the ache of loneliness in hospital halls, the anger, the betrayal, and the rebirth. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And maybe someday another mother like me would read my words and realize she wasn't alone. I filled my days with more than writing. I volunteered at the library, teaching children how to read. I joined a local art class and smeared paint across canvases without caring whether the result was good. I planted roses in my garden, red and pink and yellow, each bloom a symbol of a life finally lived for myself. For the first time in 58 years, I wasn't just Adrian's mother, I was Margot Hale. And that was enough. Meanwhile, Adrian's world continued to unravel. The house, once the jewel of his pride, was placed in foreclosure. I drove by it one afternoon on my way to the grocery store and saw the notice taped to the door. The lawn was overgrown, the shutters peeling, as if the building itself was ashamed of its occupants. Adrian's business collapsed piece by piece. Without funding, without contracts, without Daniel Hart's support, he had nothing left. His so-called empire was reduced to a shell corporation drowning in debt. Cassandra, stripped of her designer clothes and sponsorship deals, took a job at a small boutique downtown. I passed by once and saw her through the window, folding sweaters with a forced smile. She looked tired, older than her years, like the glamour had drained away and left nothing but weariness. Their friends were gone, their social status erased. The people who had once flocked to their parties now whispered about their downfall with cruel amusement. Their names became warnings. Don't live beyond your means. Don't treat family like a bank. Look what happened to Adrian and Cassandra. It was poetic justice, and I didn't lift a finger. One crisp autumn morning, I heard another knock at my door. When I opened it, I was startled to see Elena Cross standing there. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman from Naomi's photos. Her makeup was gone, her eyes red-rimmed, her posture weary. "Mrs. Hale," she said softly. "May I come in?" For a moment, I hesitated, but then I nodded and led her into the living room. She sat on the edge of the couch, twisting her hands in her lap. I wanted to apologize." I raised an eyebrow. "Apologize?" She nodded quickly, tears forming. "Adrian told me you were cruel, that you didn't support him, that you were bitter and jealous of his success. He made me believe you were cold, unloving. But when everything fell apart, I started seeing the truth. He lied to me. He lied about everything." I said nothing, letting her continue. She looked at me then, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for being part of it. I should have seen through him sooner. I should have known no man who spoke about his mother the way he did could be trusted. But I didn't. And I became part of the hurt. He caused you." For the first time, I saw sincerity in her eyes. I leaned back, studying her. "You were deceived, Elena, like I was once. The difference is, I finally woke up." She nodded slowly, a tear sliding down her cheek. You were brave. Cutting him off. It was the bravest thing you could have done. I wish I had your strength. I placed a hand gently on hers. Strength isn't born in moments of peace. It's forged in fire. You'll find yours when you're ready. She squeezed my hand once, then stood. Thank you, she whispered, before leaving quietly into the morning light. As the door closed, I felt no bitterness toward her. She too had been a victim of Adrian's charm, his lies, his hunger for more. And in her apology, I found another piece of closure. It came late one night, when the house was quiet and I was editing another chapter of my memoir. My phone buzzed, and when I saw his name, I almost didn't answer. But some part of me needed to hear it, to hear how far he'd fallen. Mom, Adrian's voice cracked through the line. Please, I don't have anywhere else to go. Cassandra left me. The house is gone. The business is gone. I'm living in a friend's spare room. I just need help. A little money to get back on my feet, please. His words poured out, desperate, pitiful. I listened in silence until he was done. Then, calmly, I asked, Why, Adrian? Why should I help you? Because I'm your son, he cried. Because no matter what's happened, I'm still your son, and you're still my mother. You can't just turn your back on me. I closed my eyes, remembering the beeping machines in the hospital, the sound of his voice dismissing me to a nurse, the years of sacrifice met with greed. When I spoke, my voice was steady, unwavering. You don't love me, Adrian. You love what I can do for you. And until you learn the difference, you will always be empty. There was a pause, then a broken sob. So that's it? You're really cutting me off? Yes, I said simply. For good. And with that, I ended the call. I set the phone down and felt no guilt, only release. That night, I stepped outside into the cool air. The stars glittered above me, endless and eternal. I tilted my head back, breathing in the vastness of the universe. For so long my world had been small. My son, his needs, his demands, his shadows. Now the world felt infinite again. I thought of Adrian as a boy, his small hand. In mine, his laughter ringing through the house. I loved that boy with every part of me. But the man he became, that man I could no longer carry, and that was the final truth I needed to accept. Love without respect is exploitation, and it's never too late to take back your power. I smiled softly to myself, whispered a goodbye to the stars, and stepped back inside. This time, into a life that was mine alone. If you're still with me at this point, thank you for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me, where are you watching from? Your support means the world.